Aprilia just publicly came after Pedro Acosta, and it's not a quiet paddock grumble. It's the CEO of Aprilia Racing saying on the record that Acosta should never have been allowed to line up for that restart in Barcelona. The same restart where Alex Marquez was already in hospital with a broken collarbone and a fractured vertebra. The same race where Johann Zarco's leg ended up trapped under Bagnaia's Ducati. 3 starts, 2 riders in surgery, and Aprilia is now openly questioning whether one of MotoGP's biggest stars should have been on the grid at all. So why is Aprilia going public with this now? And what is Massimo Rivola really trying to do? Because this isn't just about one rider. Aprilia had their own disaster at Barcelona. Jorge Martin, 2 points off the championship lead, taken out by his own teammate of a teammate, Raul Fernandez, at the first restart. Rivola in a visible confrontation with Trackhouse boss Davide Brivio in pit lane. Martin shoving his own team manager walking back to the garage. By every measure, Aprilia should be looking inward, not aiming outward. Instead, the CEO walked into a Sky Italia camera and pointed at Pedro Acosta. That's a choice, and the choice tells you the target isn't the rider at all. Here's what actually happened on track. Acosta is leading the race from pole. Turn 9. His KTM suffers a complete electronic throttle-by-wire failure, something he reportedly flagged to KTM after qualifying on Saturday. The bike decelerates on the racing line. Alex Marquez, running second and shadowing his countryman, has no time to react. He hits the back of Acosta's bike at speed and is launched. Acosta raised an arm to warn the field, but at that closing speed, an arm is nothing. The result for Alex Marquez: surgery, a broken collarbone, a fractured vertebra, 2 Grands Prix on the sidelines, and a championship campaign that was finally landing now derailed. Red flag thrown. The race is stopped, but the consequences are only beginning. And then something strange happens. Acosta, the rider whose bike caused the chaos, gets back to the pits within the 5-minute window, jumps on his second machine, lines up for the restart. He leads the race for most of the way, drops to 4th in the closing laps, then gets punted off at the final corner by Ogura. Ogura, an Aprilia rider, ending Acosta's day. Read that order of events again. The bike that triggered the red flag is back on the grid in under 5 minutes. The rider it took down is being prepped for theatre, and nobody in race direction had the authority to intervene, because technically the rules allowed it. This is where Rivola steps in, and his words are very careful. "I have nothing against Pedro," he told Sky Italia. He says it more than once. He goes out of his way to neutralise the personal angle. So if it's not personal, what is it? Rivola says plainly, a rider who, for one reason or another, even if it's beyond his control, like a technical issue, causes a red flag, shouldn't then restart and continue the race. That's the headline. That's what every outlet ran with. But the line that actually matters comes later, and it's the one that should make every MotoGP fan stop scrolling. And oh, there's one more part of this. Because Rivola dropped a detail that almost slipped past everyone. He said, if the red flag had come out 1 lap after Pedro's engine failure, he wouldn't have been able to restart, because the rules state that the rider must return to the pits on the bike. Read that again. 1 lap later, same crash, same cause, same injuries to Alex Marquez, and Acosta is automatically out by rule. The only thing separating him from disqualification was how quickly race direction reached for the button. That isn't a principle. That's a stopwatch. That is a sport whose rule book depends on timing rather than logic. And Rivola just exposed it on Italian television. And it gets worse. MotoGP's chief sporting officer, Carlos Ezpeleta, went on the record defending the decision to restart Catalunya twice. Race control followed the regulations as they exist. Nobody is technically wrong. That's exactly the problem. When a rule is followed perfectly and the outcome is still indefensible, the issue stops being the application and starts being the rule itself. Rivola understands this. That's why he keeps repeating he isn't criticising race direction. He's criticising the framework race direction is forced to operate inside. A framework written before bikes were this fast, before grids were this tight, and before a single throttle-by-wire failure could put a rider in surgery. This is the moment the story stops being about Aprilia, because Massimo Rivola is not just the CEO of Aprilia Racing. He is the president of the MSMA, the Manufacturers Association, the body that represents every single bike maker in MotoGP. Ducati, KTM, Honda, Yamaha, Aprilia. When the MSMA president speaks publicly about regulations, he isn't grumbling on behalf of his own brand. He's speaking on behalf of every manufacturer that signs the checks that keep this paddock alive. And the manufacturers are now openly saying, through their elected representative, that the restart rule is broken. That isn't a Sky Italia interview anymore. That's a shot fired at Dorna and the FIM, and everybody in the paddock heard it. And here is the part nobody wants to connect. In the days after Rivola went public, Pedro Acosta himself said something that lands very differently now. Asked about whether MotoGP riders should form a unified association, the kind of body that could push back on safety regulations from inside the cockpit, Acosta said the riders are too egocentric for it to work. His own words, "The riders who race in this paddock will not organise themselves. They've now admitted it on the record. So when the next dangerous situation arises, who exactly is meant to speak for them?" People thought this was Aprilia attacking Acosta. It wasn't. It was the manufacturers stepping into the silence the riders left behind. The Catalan GP didn't expose a rider. It exposed a sport whose safety politics now depend on whoever is willing to speak first. And right now, that isn't the riders, it isn't race control, and it isn't Dorna. It's the bike makers. The same bike makers who, until very recently, stayed out of these arguments entirely. That silence is over. That's not a small shift. That's a structural one, and it's happening in real time while the championship rolls on to Mugello. So make no mistake, Rivola wasn't really talking about Pedro Acosta. He was using Pedro Acosta. He was using a 21-year-old Spanish star on pole in the middle of his strongest weekend of the year to drag a stopwatch-dependent rulebook into public view. Acosta is not the villain of this story. He's the example. The villain is a regulation that allowed the rider who caused the incident to keep racing, while the rider who got hit was being prepped for surgery. And until the riders organise themselves, the manufacturers will keep using moments like this, because they're the only ones left who can. So here's the real question. If the rule was wrong on Sunday, was it wrong before Sunday, and nobody said it out loud? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video appearing on your screen right now.